religious Americans have been under attack by former President Barack Obama and then President Joe Biden's far left policies for years. Don't believe me? The Little Sisters of the Poor, of all people, had to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court to get an exemption to Obamacare's contraception mandate. A bunch of nuns. And that brings us to the case of Jack Phillips. He is the incredibly talented cake artist from Colorado who declined to make a cake for a same-sex wedding due to his sincerely held Christian beliefs. His case went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the ordeal took a major emotional toll on Jack, his family, and his employees. Here's part of my interview with him back in 2017.
But it's been emotional for us as well. There were days where my wife was afraid. Actually, afraid to come to the shop. We've had death threats, harassing phone calls. I've been forced by the government to give up 40% of my business, half of my employees. It's been emotional on our side as well.
But the mainstream media won't tell you about Jack's pain. He wound up winning his case in 2018, but that was not the end of the story. On the very same day the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear that case, a transgender attorney requested that Jack make him, it was a man posing as a woman, a pink cake with blue frosting to celebrate a, quote, gender transition. Jack, once again, declined, and that trans attorney took legal action against him. That case has been in the courts for years. Thankfully, in October, the Colorado Supreme Court dismissed the case, which is good for Jack, but they did it on procedural grounds. They didn't get into the substance about whether there was an obligation to bake the cake or not. They just said that the case had not been properly filed. Here with me to discuss whether the harassment of Jack Phillips is finally over is the man himself, along with his attorney, Kristen Waggoner, who is the president and general counsel of Alliance Defending Freedom. Welcome to you both. Great to see you both again. Well, congratulations, Jack, because at least this chapter of harassment against you is over. But how confident are we that the saga is over?
You never know what other people are going to do, but I know this case cannot be appealed by the other side, and so it's completely finished.
Were you thrilled when you finally got this ruling?
I was. It was a really good ruling. The court did exactly what we asked them to do. They dismissed the case. And after 12 years plus, it's over, and I can go back to my baking and the things that I love this business for.
So the shop's still open?
The shop is still open, though it's a lot different than it was before all this started. First, I just want to make sure that it's clear that we serve everybody, including the person who sued us this time and the state of Colorado representing the two men who sued us before. We serve everybody, but we just can't create every cake and every message with our express every message with our custom cakes.
Exactly. If they want to come in and have a random cake or get a coffee or whatever, they can do all that. It's that you didn't want to be compelled to celebrate gay marriage or pretend that men can become women through a cake. Here's my question for you, Kristen. I'm worried because they didn't decide it on the substance, the Colorado Supreme Court, and they should have. To me, this is a no-brainer. There should have at least been dictum in there saying, okay, they screwed up procedurally, so we're going to throw it out. But by the way, since this case was started, 303 Creative was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, and that case made very clear that a state's civil rights laws cannot force a business like Jack's to engage in compelled speech, even if the state lawmakers think the compelled speech is really, really good and really, really moral.
You're absolutely right. And essentially what the Colorado court did, which is about as far left of a court as you can find, is they tried to not follow the 303 Creative decision because it protects Jack and kick the case on procedural grounds. But in terms of what happens next, Jack is going to continue to speak freely. And I think what's important is to realize his case started in 2012. He's been on this journey for 12 years now. And he was one of the first where government was trying to weaponize the law to silence, censor, and punish people because they disagreed with the government's view. And because of Jack's stand, it didn't just lead to one decision that protected religious freedom, it led to the 303 creative decision that protects his speech, as well as all of our speech.
He's a warrior, and he's been put through hell for 2 cakes. He's been put through hell over 2 cakes because he's become their favorite target. They're trying to bully you, Jack. Can you just tell us, can you give us a little bit about your childhood? Like, what made you strong enough to stand up to people trying to bully you into saying, no, I'll just get past my beliefs because I don't want this aggravation?
Well, I know that my background was with art. I loved to draw and paint and sketch and sculpt and all those things growing up. And when I got to a job in a bakery and I found out there was cake decorating, then I knew that I could use my skills and talents and experience to use the cakes as a canvas to help people express their messages in special events and special occasions. As far as being able to stand up to all this for the last 12 years, Alliance Defending Freedom has been there right from the start to help us out. But one of the commissioners compared religious freedom, said it was a, quote, despicable piece of rhetoric, and it's been used for all kinds of things like slavery and the Holocaust. And my father fought in World War II. He landed in Normandy, he fought across France and Germany and Belgium, and he ended up being part of a group that liberated Buchenwald concentration camp. And for her to compare a decision to stand by my principles and not create a cake expressing a message that went so far against him to the Holocaust of Hitler was just ludicrous. So that kind of background.
It's part of the destruction of your life and your business and your character. I mean, it does take a very strong man to go through what you've been through, even with a group as great as Alliance Defending Freedom standing by your side. It takes a lot of temerity. I salute you again for fighting for all of us, because 303 Creative was huge, Kristen. I do think it's important that when the lower courts in Colorado were ruling against Jack on this trans case, it had not yet been decided. They were ruling against him substantively, like on the merits, but they had not yet been, they're bound by that Supreme Court precedent, 303 Creative, which says you can't force compelled speech on a business. Then it came down, and then the Colorado Supreme Court got the case, but they didn't deal with it. They just said, we're bouncing, we're throwing out, we're going to rule for Jack because the other side screwed up procedurally. So we haven't yet had the case that tries to test the trans thing in the wake of 303 Creative. And the reason it's really important is because Gorsuch wrote the majority opinion in 303 Creative, but he was critical to Bostock, which is the reason it's illegal to make any hiring decisions or firing decisions that factor in somebody's trans status. So we're going to get a case, are we not, that's going to go up, like maybe Jack's situation, or I think it could happen in the case of a company that demands somebody say the, quote, preferred pronouns, right? Because that's what the state human rights law requires. And the person says, I'm not doing that in my religion, like mine. We don't believe that God makes mistakes on people and that there are only 2 sexes, male and female, and I'm not going to pretend that you can change. And that's exactly the kind of case where you could file it and you could say, I refuse, that's compelled speech, I'm not going to say it. And you tell me at some point the Supreme Court is going to have to deal with what 303 Creative means in that context.
Megyn, I would say I'm not sure that the case will go up, that it has to go up, because I do feel like in some respects we've turned the tide on the gender identity issue. That's not to say that it won't, but I guess I would put it this way. In Gorsuch's opinion in 303 Creative, he made it very clear and explicitly said that you can't use these types of laws to violate people's constitutional rights, and that you do have the right to be able to speak freely. At Alliance Defending Freedom, we have had the privilege of representing a number of teachers and counselors who have fought for their right to speak freely and not use the wrong pronouns, and they've won. I believe that the majority of the Supreme Court will continue to protect the right of free speech in this area, but I also think it's critical to remember that doesn't mean the battles won't be fought in the lower courts, and that perhaps they will have to take a case in the end because courts have ruled incorrectly. I think right now of the global censorship that we're seeing around the world and how it's playing out in the digital sphere, and it is gender identity that's the Trojan horse to this. But again, I would just say, as we stand up, Jack provides an example for every average, normal American that's just trying to go about their business to say, when my rights are violated, I can stand and I can make a difference and I can change the laws of a nation in doing so.
For those of us who have been holding our breath for the past several months, waiting for this election, we can finally exhale. Work can now be done on the major issues this country's facing, one of the most significant being our national debt. The fact is our nation's broke, and that debt is a house of cards that cannot be quickly dismantled. So the strategy for you probably remains the same when it comes to your investments. You might want to diversify your savings. This is why I want to tell you about Birch Gold. So many things are out of our control, out of our president's control, so it can be important to have a safe haven for your savings. Birch Gold Group can help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news is it does not cost you 1 cent out of pocket. Text MK to 989898 to get your free info kit on gold. Plus, right now you will receive a free 1-ounce silver eagle for every $5,000 purchased. Protect your savings with Birch Gold and text MK to 989898 to claim your eligibility for free silver today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.